Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
You know, there's this quote from Maya Angelou that I just love, and it says that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story on the inside. And the majority of these kids, just being in foster care in and of itself, removed from your family structure into a system where you're sort of passed around to different foster homes or passed around to different group homes, that's traumatic in and of itself. And to be able to tell your story, it creates this level of understanding to help people understand some of the choices you make. It also helps in terms of giving other people permission to tell their stories, because we all have a story. And a lot of times, you know, youth go and they meet with counselors and therapists, and they get excellent advice and strategies and techniques to help overcome some of those traumas, but those stories go into a file. But when you can unleash a story that not just changes your life, but it gives somebody else permission to tell their story, and it changes other people's lives, that's impact, that's validation, that's celebration. And at the end of the day, we all want to be validated. So it creates so many layers of accomplishments and so many layers of impact, that for me, it's just a perfect medium. We're content-driven people. We're all consumed by content one way or another. So why not use content to educate people? Why not use content to cause people to sort of address their own challenges?
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi there, this is Jake Eberly, the producer of the Bonus Babies podcast, and today Jayne Amelia speaks with Tige Charity. Tige is the founder and executive director of Kids in the Spotlight, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to help foster youth heal and grow from trauma through the power of storytelling and filmmaking. And to that end, they've created over 85 films with more than 850 youth impacted by foster care. Here's Tige Charity.
Okay, I'm here with Tige Charity, and that is her real name, ladies and gentlemen. That is her real name. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We spoke a little bit about who you are and what you're doing when we chatted briefly on the phone, but can you just tell us, so our listeners can hear it, how were you raised? What was your family of origin, and where are you from and all that?
Yeah, well, I'm actually from a small town called Baker, Louisiana, which is in the East Baton Rouge Parish area. But I was really blessed to be raised in a home with a mother and a father and one sister who was 10 years younger than me. So I was an only child for about 10 years.
Oh, until
And then
that
she came
little
with,
monster
I know,
came.
right. And what's so funny is every birthday, I used to wish for a sister or a brother. And then by the time I got one, I was like, wait a minute, I'm almost like in my preteens. I don't have time for a sibling now. But I was really blessed. I was raised in a home with a mother and a father. Wasn't always a most perfect home, but it was definitely a loving home. And it was a home where my parents always seemed to have other people's kids.
Yeah, you said there were always a lot of kids around that they were looking after, right?
Exactly. There was always, either one of their siblings' kids or a couple of their siblings' kids, that have lived with us from time to time. And it was just the norm for us. So, I never really thought about it as, because I worked with kids in foster care, I never really thought about it in the sense of, are these foster kids? Because we never really relied on a system we just as a village, as a family, took care of one another. And that's what I was used to. That's how I was raised to really to take care of one another, to look after other people's kids when there's a time of need. And that's all I know.
So then you ended up coming to LA. Your husband's an actor, right? So,
Yes,
right. So
correct.
you joined him here in order to make his career happen. Is that what it was, or something else?
Yeah, well, no. Well, interesting thing is, I was visiting my best friend who lives in Connecticut. She and I went to college together. We went to Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma together. And she lived in Connecticut. I lived in Louisiana. And one Thanksgiving, I decided I was going to spend Thanksgiving with her and the family because she was always in Louisiana. So I'm like, I'm not going to be selfish this year. I'm going to go visit her. And on that particular visit, we were at a restaurant in Harlem called Sylvia's. It's a world famous soul food restaurant. And while we were there, a gentleman approached my table to make an introduction, and the rest is history. That gentleman was my husband. So
Oh,
we met
wow.
on the East Coast. We met on the East Coast. I eventually moved to Connecticut and lived with my best friend just so I could give the relationship a fair try. Because, long distance relationships can be really, really tricky. So I was like, let me see. I'm kind of feeling this guy. Let me just move. I was working in insurance as a litigations claims specialist, so I could transfer at any insurance company, which I did, and decided to give it a try. And we ended up, he proposed, we got married, we bought a home in New Jersey where we lived for 3.5 years.
I'm from Jersey. Where in Jersey were
Yeah.
you? Where was
We
that?
actually lived in a town called Newark. There was a new development there called Society Hill,
Hmm.
and we bought a condominium in Society Hill in Newark, New Jersey. But before we got married, he always said that, we're going to end up in California because of the business that I'm in. And 3 years in the marriage, he was like, yep, time to make that move. So I said, okay. So here I am.
Right. And then, so you're here and you're working as a litigation specialist, and you had an epiphany one night. Tell me about that.
Yes, well, a couple of things happened. When we moved to California, shortly after we got here, my husband joined a theater group, and that theater group was teaching, they were actually doing a workshop at an all girls group home, and it was on a Saturday. So my husband asked me if I wanted to accompany them. So I did. And it was my first time ever being in a foster care group home with kids in the system up close and personal. And that experience literally cracked my heart wide open and just sort of really compelled me to want to do something to give back. But 2 years passed, I did nothing. In 2008, the economy, we started to go through a recession. And then 2009, I was laid off from the job that I had started, when I got to California. Well, shortly after I moved to California, I ended up being laid off from that job. It was my first time in my 16-year career ever being involuntarily unemployed. But at the same time, my church was doing a series called Discovering God's Dream for Your Life. So I was in this interesting place. I got to get another job. I really don't want to get another job doing what I'm doing because I was just tired of insurance and claims and all of that. And then remembering these girls that I had met a couple of years ago. And then my church is doing this series called Purpose and Discovering. So it was like a whirlwind. And one night I just had what I called a temper tantrum with God. And I was like, God, I really don't want to get in the rat race of looking for another job. If there's something that I am supposed to be doing, if this thing called purpose is real, I'm going to need you to speak to me. I'm going to need you to give me some directions because I'm really at the end of myself. I'm in a fairly new state. I don't want to go back into claims. I'm good at it. I can easily get a job in that, but I don't want to do it. I felt like it was sucking the life out of me. And, I'm talking about it very calmly now, but trust me, that night it was dramatic. I was crying and snot and the whole 9 yards. I was literally feeling like I was on the edge of just a mental breakdown. And after I finished sobbing and crying and screaming at God and all of that stuff,
Right. Let me just ask you, where was your husband during this? Did he know what was going on?
he was not
He
home,
wasn't
thank
home.
God, because
Right.
he would have called
Yeah,
somebody
yeah. He
to
would have
come and
said, I need
rescue me.
help.
No, exactly. I was like, oh, thank you, God. Yeah, he wasn't home. I was home alone that evening, and we didn't have any kids, so it was just me. And when I was reminded of those kids that I met, those girls in that group home that I met a couple of years ago, I felt like God was telling me, give those kids something that you like. Give them the arts. A group of girls were acting up. And I remember having a moment of judgment when I was at the facility, like, why are these kids acting up? Company is present. And at that same moment, I realized that these kids aren't acting up. They're just asking for attention. So that night, it was like, create a platform for them to basically tell their stories their way, teach them how to write, cast, and star in their own short films, and then celebrate them in a huge way, like, your version of the Academy Awards. And I jumped up and I started writing all of these things down in a journal. And I'm not the journaler. I do not journal, but I have one because we all have journals in our home. It's the thing to have in your home, right? And so I found one and I just started writing the vision down. And here we are now, 14 years later.
Wow. So as you're speaking, I'm looking at the wall behind you, which is filled with accolades and all kinds of celebrations and beautiful pictures and frames of all these awards that you've won and how important an impact your organization has made. So tell me what you do. Like actually, let me just back up. What made you think you could do this?
You know what? The audacity to think that. Well, for me, being a woman of faith, when I believe I hear God speak and say, do something, I'm going to do it because I know he's got my back in it. So that was it for me. And because I was married to, a husband who's an actor, I'm like, who are some of your friends in the industry that I can call? And it also so happened that the church that I was attending, there were a lot of people in the entertainment industry that was at that church. So I started tapping. I'm like, look, we're doing this series called Discovering God's Dream and Purpose. I'm about to pull all of y'all in here.
Yeah.
And so I started asking them, can you help me with this? Can you help me? And it was really figuring it all out, but being very prayerful and intentional about every move and every person I brought in to sort of walk alongside us to build this out.
Right. So do you think that your background in claims and the very thorough work you had to do helped in any way in terms of the conception and the execution, or did you have to draw on all new talents?
You know what? I think there was definitely some things I drew on in terms of organizational skills, and also knowing I've always been sort of a people's person, just kind of knowing how to talk to people, and kindness is just sort of my love language. I love kindness. I love being kind. I love people treating me kindly, and so just it was all of that. I think that contributed to it, but just the business sense of putting it together, I do believe I drew, although I didn't think about it at the time, but I do believe some of those skills that I exercise as a litigations claims specialist definitely transferred over to building a business from ground up.
Right. And you have now involved hundreds of kids. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like, what was the first kid like, and what's happening now?
Oh gosh, it's so funny because the first program, we went into a middle school in Compton and we set up a 10-week program there. It's our script to screen program. I brought in some of those industry professionals from the church that I worked with, screenwriters. One of the screenwriters used to write on the show In Living Colors, and she's done several award shows. She was a writer for like the Trump Awards and just a bunch of different shows, Celebration of Gospel. And I'm like, hey, do you think you can teach screenwriting? And so brought my husband in to teach acting classes. And from there, from that pilot and shooting that first project, we just continued to do that work. And I can, right now we have one of our youth who attended one of the first programs, who is an amazing director working successfully in the industry. He graduated from Otis College about, 5 years ago. And now he's been doing projects for Hulu. He created the logo for, I think, the BET streaming platform. And he came back to Kids in the Spotlight this year and produced a short commercial, brought in his commercial agent and his team of people. And they together worked with a few of our current youth to produce a commercial about the organization. So we're excited. We love seeing our first year youth come back and pay it forward.
So what's happened then, like now? Because now we're talking hundreds of kids you've impacted.
Well, we still have them. Some of them now come back to work in the organization. Some of them are producing their own projects. We've had some to book, national commercials. They're all just in their respective fields. Like I said, the organization is 14 years young. And when we started the organization, we only worked with kids, I think, from the ages of 11 to 17. And a lot of them were a lot younger. So now we're seeing those kids sort of walk into their own, working in various areas of the entertainment industry. And some went on to different paths. Some went on to being, we have some that are studying law, that's in law school right now. We have some that are doing communications, it's just, they went on to various things. But the ones that are still in the entertainment industry and stay connected with us, they give back. They give back in various ways.
Right. So why do you think it's so important for kids who have been impacted by the foster care system to have this venue to tell their stories?
There's this quote from Maya Angelou that I just love, and it says that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story on the inside. And the majority of these kids, just being in foster care in and of itself, removed from your family structure into a system where you're sort of passed around to different foster homes or passed around to different group homes, that's traumatic in and of itself. And to be able to tell your story, it creates this level of understanding to help people understand some of the choices you make. It also helps in terms of giving other people permission to tell their stories, because we all have a story. And a lot of times, youth go and they meet with counselors and therapists, and they get excellent advice and strategies and techniques to help overcome some of those traumas. But those stories go into a file. But when you can unleash a story that not just changes your life, but it gives somebody else permission to tell their story, and it changes other people's lives, that's impact, that's validation, that's celebration. And at the end of the day, we all want to be validated. So it creates so many layers of accomplishments and so many layers of impact, that for me, it's just a perfect medium. We're content-driven people. We're all consumed by content one way or another. So why not use content to educate people? Why not use content to cause people to sort of address their own challenges? So that's the medium in which we're using.
A lot of the kids who've been on this program, they will often say, either during the recording or very often after, they say, "Thank you for giving me this space to tell my story." And
Absolutely.
I understand that too from my own experience, but I'm just stunned that these kids who have come up in the system and are often interrogated regularly and interviewed, confronted, yet in spite of that, and there's all this documentation of what's happening in their lives, what they did and didn't do, in spite of that, very often the kids do not feel heard. They do not.
Exactly. They do not. And it's for us at Kids in the Spotlight, it's our job to make sure they're seen, heard, validated, celebrated, prepared, and employed. So those are all the components that we do here at the program, because it's great to be able to tell a story, but hey, we're in Hollywood. There are a lot of jobs to be had. So we are trying to make sure that our kids get connected to those jobs as well. But absolutely, just being heard is, it's that validation, like I said earlier, that we all want. We all need it. We all want to be understood. And being able to tell your story helps others to understand. We see things on the news, tragic stories. We see, a kid that's, out doing something just bizarre, whatever it is, shoplifting, whatever it is. And oftentimes we have judgment and we really don't know. So these films really, I think, help create a level of understanding to make people think, before I have judgment, before I assume anything, let me show you who we are. Let me show you who these young people are. And hopefully it will cause a village to champion around them to make sure that we're creating a different narrative and a different pipeline for them.
Has there been a time in your life when you felt that you weren't heard, when you weren't understood, even when you were trying to communicate?
Oh God, yeah, I've been married 22 years.
Yeah, I get it.
But of course, I mean, absolutely. I remember growing up, and I had an older cousin to tell me one time, girls should be seen and not heard. I was like, oh, okay. And that kind of remark is devastating. It's like, oh, what I have to say doesn't matter, what my opinion isn't important, or I'm just supposed to, present as a cute girl, trophy girl, and that's all there is to me. So no, absolutely, there have been times, and there have been times when I went through a phase in my teenage year where I was quote unquote shy. I used to tell people I'm shy, and all of it's fear based. It was really just fear based of me feeling like what I have to say is not important enough. And then I struggled with my own at the time. Dyslexia was something that I'd never been tested for, but as I grew older and became an adult and I started reading what dyslexia is, I was like, wait a minute, I think that's me, because school was never easy for me. It was necessary. I was the first person on both sides of my family to graduate college. I'm a hard worker. I'm going to do the work, but it was a struggle in so many areas. And then, being a girl from Louisiana, oftentimes, my words may not always come out as articulate as someone else in the room. And so I'm like, oh, I don't want to say anything or mispronounce a word or any of that. Now that I know better, and as I'm on my own journey to healing, I know to not allow my own insecurities and fear to keep me from speaking up. Of just being afraid that, oh, am I going to say the wrong thing? Is that subject and verb is going to agree? All of these things. Now I'm just like, okay, if it doesn't, if they need clarification, let me get the clarification that's needed. Or, oh, how do you say that? Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I don't use it or operate in a place of shame like I used to.
Have there been kids in the program who wanted to tell their story, that wanted to create something, that wanted to make a film about themselves, and then weren't able to do it or couldn't get through it? Or are there were like surprising breakthroughs?
Always surprising breakthroughs, but never one that we've had a kid say, no, I no longer want to tell that story. The thing is peer-to-peer learning is so powerful. And because we have over 90 short films, these kids see films that other youth have done, and they're like, if they can do it, I can do it too. That's the empowering thing about it. But even in the beginning, when we didn't have collateral, it was just kids taking our word for it that we were going to really help them tell their story, but not just help them tell their story, showcase their story at our Kids Film Awards, which is our version of the Academy Awards. And we're going to invite their family and friends and industry professionals to come see these films. They had to trust us. But after that first year, after that second year of capturing and doing the work, it became easier. But we do reach kids that think that, oh my gosh, my story is like the worst story ever. I could never, like nobody would understand that. But because we have a partnership, I should say. We have a partnership with Antioch University School of Psychology. We provide counseling sessions and things like that for our youth that may need it. So if something comes up and they feel like it was a trigger, we want to make sure that we have, the right team around them to help them navigate. And at any time, if a youth does feel like they can't tell a story, we'll say, okay, but we haven't had that yet. They're more ready than we know.
That's so great that you have that support, though, because that is important. It's in place that you have a team. Yeah, that's really great.
Absolutely.
I've just started to ask this question, and I'm really curious about how the many different answers I get. But do you ever think about values? And were you raised with values? Did you talk about values? And if I even say the word values, what does that mean to you?
Oh my gosh, that means a lot. Like I said earlier, I am a woman of faith. So a lot of my values are based on biblical principles. It is who I am. I was raised up in the church. So values has always been sort of the leading, force in our household. And like I said, I would not by any means raised in the perfect household, but it was a household that was definitely self-conscious about living a lifestyle that we felt was pleasing to God.
And have there been challenges with that? Like, have you said, no, I can do this and this is how I'm living? Or have you gone astray?
No, I think probably all go astray every now and then.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
not in the sense of where I've ever felt like I needed to put my faith on the back burner for anything. None of that. And even in the work that we do, like I don't go around my kids and say, I'm a Christian and this is who we are and this is what we have to do. Not at all. They feel it through the love that we display. We just live the life. We don't necessarily have to talk about, these are our values and this is what we do. We just live them. Our organization's value is centered around the word hope. And that is for us having honest conversation, being open with one another, being patient, having that peer-to-peer engagement, empowering one another and encouraging one another. It's like it's around just the word hope. And we live that. But we get challenged with that too, because we're humans. Sometimes we have the most amazing days, and sometimes we have some challenges that we have to face, but we're committed to facing them. We're committed to working through them together because we understand the mission and the impact of the work that we're doing. And so it's the same that translates to our youth too. It's about really giving them the tools to rewrite the story for their lives. Like foster care is what happened to you, but foster care does not get to dictate the end of your life. You get to do that. You get to write that narrative. You get to write that in. And it's just a matter of encouraging them throughout the process. And that's what our kids tell us they get out of Kids in the Spotlight the most is it feels like a family. Surprisingly, that's the thing that they say the most. I'm thinking this film is so amazing. It's winning awards at this festival, but it's the love and support. It's the community. It's the family that we've created.
Yeah, I can just hear the passion in your voice, and I've seen the terrific work that you do. It's just pretty awesome. So,
Thank you.
how has this changed you as a woman, as a person, the work that you're
Oh my
doing?
gosh. Well, I think in one sense, it has helped me to realize that there's this saying that I've heard people say over and over and over again that God doesn't always call the qualified, but he qualifies the called. And so sometimes I feel like, that's so me, God, because you definitely have taken the foolish thing to confound the wise, because I don't feel like I necessarily have all of the skill sets that's needed. Even with filmmaking, people assume because I run an organization that's primarily about filmmaking that I know all things filmmaking. They said, what kind of camera is that? I'm like, I don't have a clue. I don't know anything about cameras. I don't know anything about sound equipment. So I find myself operating outside of my space, but it definitely has changed me in terms of engaging with some of the youth and knowing what they've been through. And I'm like, you have no excuse. You have no excuse to try and make anything bigger than your faith or your mission. So it's definitely given me courage. They give me courage. They inspire me. They teach us a lot. My entire team. I mean, it's 11 of us on the team, and then we have a handful of contractors, independent contractors that teaches the classes. And every day we're learning something new. We're being stretched, and it's amazing.
I'm sure that some of the stories must be really rough. So how do you deal with that? How do are there times where you say, I don't want to do this today. I'm not up to it.
Oh yeah, a lot of those days. There are days when I'm just like, I don't even want to put my feet on the ground. But again, I have to remind myself there's something so much more important. They are so much more important than the fear, the insecurities, all the things that would try to make me feel like I have nothing else to give. Like when I feel like I've reached the end of myself, I really focus on the reality of the youth that we work with and the enormous need. And I refuse to be one of the ones that have given up on them. They've had enough people. The mere fact that they're in foster care means somebody failed them somewhere. And then the system itself is so, it's so humongous. There's so many balls that get dropped. And I'm like, we can't be the ones to drop the ball. So even in those times when I'm feeling weak, I'm just like, okay, God, I need some renewed strength. I need strength for today. And it happens. It happens a lot. Some of these stories, I still cry at some of these stories. Just the thought of them, some of the ones that are on, our kids are doing stories on human trafficking. Human trafficking, I don't care how often you've seen that film or how often you've seen films about human trafficking. Every single time it cracks my heart and just make me cry because that is a real reality for too many youth. So yeah, it definitely, it weighs you down, but The weighing down is not enough to give up. The work is too important and the need is too great. So we just keep going, one day at a time.
How do you see the future for your organization or you personally? Or have you thought about somehow entering on the policy side, or have you thought about you want to make your own movie or what?
Definitely on the policy side. I mean, our youth, we have a group of youth now that are full-time producers. We got a really large grant from Sierra Hill under what's called the Elevate Youth California grant that allows 3 youth to work full-time in the organization to produce a documentary on the war on drugs in foster care. Because
Wow.
we know that in the foster care system, we medicate these kids way too much, and often the medication is not because they need it. It's just a mechanism to keep staff and everybody else to help tolerate.
Absolutely. It's a problem,
Yeah,
right? It's just to keep the kids quiet.
exactly. And so our youth are doing now a feature-length documentary about that. And that documentary is intended to create some policy changes. So we definitely are using it for that. But our end goal for Kids in the Spotlight, I mean, we have a production studio now that operates like a social enterprise that allow filmmakers to come rent space from us. And what that does is the funding goes back into the organization for us to do the work with the youth, but it also educates our youth, because every production that happens here, we link to youth from the system to work alongside those productions. So the youth are getting paid while they learn a skill, while they learn on-the-job training outside of our traditional script-to-screen program. But that's sort of for us the stepping stone to the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal for us is to create a performing arts boarding academy for kids in the system, simply because we've had kids in our program that have been to 18 different high schools, and that's ridiculous. How do we expect any of these kids to graduate and be successful in life when high school is 4 years, and you've been to 18? It's just enough to make me feel like I just sometimes want to flip over my desk. Like, it's crazy. So instead of constantly complaining about it, I'm like, well, how do we be the change? How do we be the solution to help mitigate these constant movements? And so we've been talking for years about, creating this model that allows us to take kids in the system that's high school age and have them for 4 years, to have them start as ninth grade and then matriculate each year, but then create this pipeline for them to either go to college or go directly into a trade or vocational type of training or job. And having those conversations with Department of Children and Family Services and other funders, they look at me like, who are you? You're not
Mm.
an academia. What are you talking about? How do you
Hmm.
start a school? So I'm like, okay, so we now have to step back and figure out a creative way to generate the revenue, to just do it on our own terms and not wait for permission from anybody else to say, oh yeah, you've been doing this work a while, now we're going to write you a check and just go out and do it. It's just not happening that way. But for us, it's not an excuse to not continue to do the work to build towards that. So that's the end goal for us. And for me, once when that happened, and I see that we are on a track to graduating every single youth that come through the program, and I see that the pipeline and the narrative is seriously changing, then I'm ready to just kind of pass my baton and take a rest. So that's how I see it all unfolding.
Could you just tell me once more, what's your idea for this school?
It's really a place where we're not only creating this homeschool type model to meet the youth where they are in their academic pathway, but also a place where they have a creative outlet in every form of the arts. So although we're doing the ninth through 12th grade, teaching them the basic fundamentals, but we also have a place where they're learning theater, where they're learning filmmaking, where they're learning dance, where they're learning graphic design, all these creative outlets, so that they can then release all of that creativity in one space, and a place where they reside at the school. It's a living quarter for them as well, so that we can bypass the homeless insecurity, or we can bypass food insecurity and transportation challenges and all of those things. That's why we're calling it a boarding academy. Or in some cases, if people are uncomfortable with boarding, we say residential academy. But something where we can have them for a solid 4 years to really give them sort of that sustainability that they need as they develop through their high school years. So that's the goal.
Wow, and it sounds so much better than a residential facility or a group
A
home
group
where,
home.
yeah, where the
Yes,
kids, where the refrigerators are locked and their rooms are locked. And
yes. No, no, none of that.
let me ask you, were you an athlete when you were younger?
I played basketball in middle school, but I can't. It's nothing to brag about. Well, I didn't win like championships or anything like that, but I did play basketball, and I am sort of athletic. Like I love to bowl, and I am a little competitive. I don't care if it's Uno or whatever. I play to win. I'm playing to win.
The reason I ask you that is because there's something about the way you're expressing yourself that makes me think this girl likes to get on a path. Likes to have goals, accomplish them, win, 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 move on to the next thing, move on to the next hoop, move on to the next ring, higher and higher, higher. That's really basically what you're doing.
Yeah, it's for me it's mission and impact. I like to call myself an impact junkie sometimes. Like nothing gets me more excited than impact and to see lives that were on a trajectory to anywhere else other than success, to see that change, it's the best for me. Like I feel like I that is that's the calling for me. That's the calling for me.
What do you think you're not good at?
I'm not always good at being kind to my own self, to be honest
Yeah,
with
I have
you.
that too. Yeah.
I'm not always good. I can be a little hard on myself, but there's a whole lot of things that I think I'm not good at. Like I love to sing. Even had a little CD out one time. I'm not one, somebody would say, "Oh my gosh, she's a singer," but I love to sing. I'm not the best, dealing with someone who deals with what I believe is dyslexia. I'm not the best writer. I'm not the best reader. I'm not the best. Like there's a lot of things that I feel like I operate in this place of deficit, but I choose not to look at it as a deficit. I just choose to look at it as, okay, you just got to work a little bit harder than the next person. And sometimes it feels like a lot harder than the next person.
And do you think your marriage has helped you to do the work that you're doing? The love and support of your husband? I mean, he was there. You went to that workshop with him, support him,
Because
right?
of you, right? Yes, and my husband will tell you, he's like, yeah, I'm the guy who does all the heavy lifting. Like I can call on him and say, look, I need you to go pick up these boxes, pick up these dresses, whatever we're doing. But yeah, you know what's really interesting though, because I'm married to an intellectual, and that's for real. Like he's just one of those brilliant minds that knows something about a little bit about everything, or I should say a lot about everything. He's the guy that sit back and watch Jeopardy and win all this money at home. And I'm like, dude, I need you to go on Jeopardy, like go and win the money. So it's so we're opposites to a degree, but yes, having someone that I can bounce things off of, and having someone to really, even when I'm having a bad day, to just kind of vent to, has been tremendously helpful and encouraging.
Is there anything you want to say to kids or people who might be listening who are thinking about getting involved to support youth in care, or kids who are in care who listen to this and saying, what the hell am I going to do with my life?
Absolutely. Well, kids who are in care, what I would like to say to you is that don't give up. Don't give up. That there are people, advocates out on the front line fighting for you, who believe in you, and who believe that, again, you get to write the ending to your story. So for them, we do a national screenplay competition where we invite foster youth from across the country to come into a virtual space for 5 weeks and learn screenwriting from industry professionals and submit a screenplay. And for the chance for it to be produced by Kids in the Spotlight, they could win first place, and we fly them in and we produce that film and show it at the Kids Film Awards, so they get to fly into LA twice. If we had
Wow.
funding,
Wow.
we would do it multiple times of the year and give more kids the opportunity. And also, if we could, do a version of Kids in other states, we would do that. Unfortunately, we just don't have the resources. But I would just tell any kid that's listening that's been impacted by the system, just don't give up. Don't give up.
And how about to any adults who are thinking, oh, maybe I could do something, but maybe not.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know
adults
what to do.
definitely partner with organizations that are making a difference. I mean, Kids in the Spotlight, your resources, every dime goes to making sure that kids in the system have this platform and outlet. But there are other organizations like CASA. There's a court-appointed specialist advocate groups that show up for kids in court and in life, like sponsor, volunteer, consider being a foster parent. If you don't have kids or if you have space for a kid, volunteer, take in a foster youth and be a part of the village, be a part of the change that they need. And because, like I said earlier, I'm a woman of faith, there's a scripture in James 1:27 that says true religion is taking care of orphans and widows. So for me, I feel like it's all of our they are all of our responsibilities. So I would encourage them, if you don't have the capacity to take in someone, donate to organizations like Kids in the Spotlight that's doing the work, that's on the front line. So,
And you are doing the work. And you heard that call out, right, people? Donate.
yes,
Get to work, volunteer,
yes,
become a CASA like me, donate, do all that stuff because it actually makes your life better.
absolutely.
Isn't that funny how that
Isn't
happens?
it? I think it's
Yeah.
just a divine refilling when we pour out and we're looking after one another. I just believe that there's just this divine, God that's looking out after us, looking out for us because we're looking out for one another. So, yeah.
I want to ask you one last thing that I ask all my guests, and if you can dig deep for this. And what is the one thing that no one would ever know about you unless you told them?
Ah, well, honestly, I think you got that from me earlier because I don't think I've ever shared with anyone, especially on a platform like this or any interviews. And God has blessed me to do a lot of different interviews. I don't think I've shared with anyone the reality of just dealing with what I strongly believe is dyslexia.
Yes.
Never, not even with my team. It's just something that I don't talk about because I don't really want, I don't want to have to find myself in a place where I'm constantly now trying to explain that because again, when I was growing up, we didn't know anything about that. And it's more so in my adult years with some of the struggles that I realized that's exactly what I have. I'll pick up a magazine and I'll start from the back. I'll start reading it from, it's just some isms and things that I
Wow, that's amazing. So I'm trying to, I can imagine the work you must have done as a child to get through anything.
Oh, it was hard. I've always felt like I had to work a lot harder than everyone else. And even when I was in college, I used to record the lectures and things like that just so I could go back and study because my penmanship is awful. So trying to take notes while someone is lecturing, it has always been one of those, things that I'm struggling. And in college, I didn't undergrad. I didn't have the best grades. It was the grace of God. I made it through, but it's funny how things, turn around. I also have a master's degree and I ended up getting the David Lieberman Award in my master's program. I'm still scratching my head like,
Wow.
for real? I feel like Stephen Urkel, did I do that? But but yeah, school has always been a challenge. And I think with graduate school, because I went to American Jewish University and I got an MBA in nonprofit management. And because I had started Kids in the Spotlight, everything, all the projects that I did was applied to Kids in the Spotlight. So I think having that practical learning was
Yes.
extremely helpful versus just learning random things that I need to now retain and show that I know it on a test. It's just always freaked me out. Like I can't remember but so much. But yes.
I can't help but think that somehow that kind of adversity that you faced as a child is probably helping you do the work that you do now with these kids.
I'm sure. I'm sure it probably helps create another level of empathy because I do have a philosophy with Kids in the Spotlight that no child is left behind. I don't care that they throw a tantrum. I don't care that they cussed you out or they appear to be violent. Okay, now we need to figure out a different angle. But what we're not doing is giving up. So it definitely helps me to look past the outward stuff, the internal trauma that's on the inside that's causing a behavior that looks very disruptive on the outside. So it could be very well so. And I'd like to be, what I wish somebody was for me when I was a kid. I wasn't a foster kid, but I wish somebody had recognized that, she's a bright girl, but she's struggling with reading. She's a bright girl, but she's struggling with writing. Let me see how I can intervene. Because again, I was the first one on both sides of my family to go to college. But I come from, very bright parents. My dad, he drives 18-wheelers. My mother's been selling Mary Kay since I was a little kid. Like, they got this entrepreneur spirit. So it just kind of, trickled on down to me.
You're really an admirable woman. I'm so glad you agreed to do this podcast, because
thank you.
It's just really great to hear someone that says, you know what, I'm going to do something. I'm going to discover God's will, right? Isn't that the phrase?
Yes.
And in me, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to have this positive effect on hundreds of kids, and maybe eventually thousands.
Yes.
Or tens of thousands. I mean, it's just awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
All right,
well, thank you for being a CASA volunteer. That's huge.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there are hard days. It's true, but but I'm not giving up on the kids either.
Exactly. They don't know what they don't know. And that's the thing. It's they operating from a place of just pain and hurt. And so we have to really try to figure out how to reach them beyond the pain and hurt. If we can get that to subside a little bit and just create a little bit of hope. There's something about hope. It just really, I think, helps people get through each day when you just have just a little bit of hope. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. This conversation gives me hope, actually.
Thank you so much.
Tige, oh my God, thank you so much for joining us today. You have such a positive and wonderful energy that I'm sure is infectious and great for these kids that you support. I think what you do helps all of the people you work with stretch and learn something new. It also inspires them to look within themselves to tell their story, which ultimately will give them confidence in who they are and what they're capable of. And you said something about the weighing down is definitely not enough to give up, because the need is too great. And it feels like because it's so heavy, that's why it needs addressing. So for those of you listening, if you'd like to offer more support or contribute to this program, you can visit kitsinc.org, kidsinthespotlight.org. So join us next week. We're lining up several new guests. Thank you for listening, and be well. If you or someone you know is harming themselves or thinking about harming themselves, go to crisistextline.org. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org, and in LA, casala.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposto. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at bonusbabies.org. See you next time.